Hello, I'm Ann Baker. I'm a senior vice president at Ink House based in our San Francisco office. And today I am joined with the wonderful Kate Riley, executive vice president and general manager of our office in Seattle. Hello, Kate.
Hello, good morning.
Morning. And today we are here to talk about the story that it seems like everyone is talking about, which is the Duke and Duchess of Sussex sitting down with our American Queen, Oprah Winfrey herself. While I would like this to be a gossip chit chat about the content of the interview, what we're really talking about here today is the media strategy involved, how the interview played out, what it tells us about the future of broadcast, that 17 million Americans tuned in to watch it live. I can't recall an event in the US that drew that many eyeballs. So I think that we just want to kind of understand, why are people so fascinated with this story and what it can tell us as media professionals. So Kate, I really want to start there. Why do you think 17 million people watched it? And what does that tell us about the future of the big high stakes network interview?
So I think a few things. I mean, for one thing, this is a really interesting and fascinating story, not just because Harry and Meghan are celebrities, part of the royal family, or now stepped back from the royal family, but because it's universal themes of love, it's family, it's this climax and tension around their decision to make the big break. We haven't really heard their side of the story, and I think as a culture, as a society right now in particular, we're looking for something that isn't rooted in politics or a pandemic. And this gives us, a story to really immerse ourselves on a very human level. I also think there aren't that many moments in time where we can come together, even around a story like this, outside of maybe sports, which have been a little bit more challenging this past year. So to have an opportunity to watch something together with Oprah, at the helm, as you noted, our beloved queen here in the US, and hearing a really riveting story about this family and this pretty high profile choice that they made is something that just brought folks together. And I do think it speaks to the power that broadcast can still create, these moments where we do feel connected instead of an on demand, I'll stream it, a week later. It's something that on Monday, we were all talking about. Everybody was talking about it. It was all over the media. And that's really powerful. Those moments are hard to come by these days.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so if you're Harry and Meghan, what do you think is the calculation that, one, we're going to do an interview like this at all on TV, instead of like an owned content video that they could produce? And two,
Mhm.
with Oprah specifically, what do you read into that?
So I think there are a few calculations that they made, and these are things that we talk to our clients about all the time. One is kind of that old saying, tell your side of the story first and tell it your way. For a long time, the media have been controlling the story for Meghan and Harry. We're seeing one side of the story. Oprah brought that up a few times in the interview of like, well, what we're seeing. And then Meghan and or Harry kind of walked us through the reality from their perspective. And I think that as a result, they were looking for an authentic way to do that. And of course, they could have made a video and posted it on their own channels. But what you lose in that is that other credible party, that Oprah, who is an incredibly skilled interviewer who is really well known as being, the consummate professional whenever she's interviewing a friend or just anyone. And that person will ask some of the harder questions and push a little bit. And she really made a point of that at the beginning of the interview to say, this is not paid. We have not scripted this. You don't know what I'm going to ask. And you could see moments of genuine surprise even on Oprah's face in the conversation. So that just brings a level of authenticity and credibility to the interview and allows Meghan and Harry to get their side of the story out in a really, really authentic way. And then the broadcast piece quickly is just that, we get to see facial expressions, we get to see mannerisms, kind of the posture, the tone of the interviewees. And I think that brings, again, another layer to the story and what they're trying to convey.
Yeah, I really feel like the big winner coming out of Sunday night's interview was broadcast, right? This idea
Yeah.
that there is value in that, and that sure, they could have produced their own video, but it wouldn't have had the same emotional impact at all or the same credibility. I also think that it's worth thinking about as they are making calculations about, okay, if we're going to do a broadcast interview, who do we do that with? And
Hmm.
the idea that Oprah is an American, that she's a very visible American, and that she has emotional resonance for Americans tells me that the target audience for this particular interview is not people in the UK. It's really about sort of correcting the record for Americans who are now their sort of new constituents between their deals with Spotify and Netflix. And it was an opportunity to sort of reset the narrative and say, okay, if we're going to be visible here in the US, we need to make sure that people understand what we've been through so that we don't have to continue talking about it, and it was a chance to put all of that behind them. And it feels to me that they probably really effectively did that.
Yeah. So, kind of on that note, how would you say they did in managing the interview? Like, what stuck out to you in the way that they approached it, and ultimately, how do you think they, came out? Do you think they nailed the performance, nailed the authenticity we were looking for?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things that Meghan did that we teach when we do media training, right? And one of which is to use examples. And I think she did that
Mhm.
really effectively in a couple places. One was when she was talking about this idea that she had made during the, lead up to her wedding, that she had made Kate Middleton cry. And she's like, no, it was actually the other way around. And she gave some fairly specific details into what had
Mm.
happened. And I did not read, for me, that the goal of that was to sort of smear Kate. I think she took pains to say that she's a good person. She apologized. I had forgived her. I would have even liked her to say a little bit more like, yeah, it's a wedding, people are emotional, things happen, whatever. It
We're
wasn't
all human.
we're all human. It wasn't a big deal. The big deal was that months and months later, it got spun this other way and no one bothered to correct the record. And I think that that puts a really fine point on what she saw as the issue, which is that no one was really trying to defend them or correct misperceptions in the press that were making things difficult for her. The other thing that I think she did really effectively is when she talked about the period of time when she was having suicidal tendencies, which was extremely moving. And she sort of points to this photo where the reaction to that picture at the time was like, oh, how pretty are you? How beautiful. She says, like, my friend texted me and was like, girl, you look gorgeous. And when she looks at these pictures, what she sees is that Harry's holding her really tightly because he doesn't want her to be alone. And
Mm.
so I think for me, that's effective because it underscores this idea that you don't know what's going on. And things can be pretty and gorgeous and lovely on the outside, but that doesn't really get at the disease, the rot that's on the inside that they were really feeling. So I thought that that was really great. I do think that Harry potentially came off as a little bit more authentic because he's less polished. And I do wonder
Yeah.
if her sort of experience and training as an actor, which makes it easy for her to talk, and she does all the things that we teach in media training, pausing before you answer questions, really effectively. And he's a little bit more bumbling because, quite frankly, he probably does have significantly less practice with it than her.
Yeah.
I think if you already see her as calculated and kind of fake, that probably didn't do that much to sway your opinion of her. But ultimately, I mean, what are we all talking about over the last few days? It's Wednesday. This aired on Sunday. We're still here talking about it. I think they really
Yeah.
put the message across in a very effective way.
Yeah, and I think those moments where she really let a little bit of emotion out and let, kind of the around being a mother, around her thoughts of suicide, that's where you see, okay, this is real. This is real. And I think for our spokespeople and our clients, hopefully we're not necessarily needing to go to that extreme and share personal emotion, but it's just a really good reminder of how that is important. The way you really like come across as either too polished or letting some of your true kind of like authenticity come through. Um, one last thing, Anne, I wanted to ask you about was a little bit around the strategy by the monarchy. So there were great pains that Meghan took in talking about, the royal family versus the firm, the institution or the enterprise behind the monarchy itself. And we can think about that a little bit like we do our clients. They're enterprises and they've got a business to run and an image to uphold. And leading up to this interview, it seemed like they were really going out of their way and taking pains to do a little bit of getting ahead of it by leaking, gossip about Meghan and how she was a bully to the royal family and all of that. Do you think they succeeded?
No, I don't at all. A couple things about that. So one is the idea that they were trying to get out ahead of it. I think Oprah production company, Harpo, did a really good job of keeping a super tight lid about what was going to be in the interview. So I don't get the impression that they understood what the allegations were going to be. And so they kind of just reached into the bag on like, okay, what do we have? We have this like bullying
Mhm.
narrative. And in light of the interview, it doesn't really make sense. It's kind of a disconnect. And so I think that it ultimately drew more attention to the interview instead of less. And so I
Yeah.
think that they would have done a lot better by not focusing on this idea that Meghan's a bully, but rather sort of trying to make them irrelevant by talking about the good works that other members of the family are doing. Smear campaigns as corporate entities are pretty tough to pull off, in my opinion. It rarely goes the way you want it to.
Yeah.
So I don't think that that was a successful media strategy. And it'll be really interesting to see where they go from here. You know, the Crown put out a statement sort of saying like these allegations are disturbing, you know, we're sorry that they're in fact I don't actually think they said they're sorry, like we're saddened to learn about the full extent of what they were going through. So, you know, it's kind of tough. I mean, I think that the palace or the firm lives in a little bit of a glass house. You know, the idea
Yeah.
that they're going to sort of spend time investigating several-year-old bullying allegations against Meghan, but are not investigating Prince Andrew and his own issues with Jeffrey Epstein, it's a little tough, you know, as a media.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about media strategy around how to deal with crisis issues like that, you do want to think about, okay, is what I'm saying going to draw more attention to the thing that I
Yep.
want everyone to ignore? And two, is it going to draw even more attention to like my own skeletons and my own issues? And I think that that approach did both of those things. So I don't think it was a successful attempt at all.
Yeah, it really came across as defensive and ultimately reinforced much of what the interview was exploring around the media perception versus, what Meghan and Harry were experiencing. And so monarchy in many ways just reinforced that with their behavior and their tactics.
Yeah.
So well, really interesting stuff. Thank you, and for this great conversation. Hopefully, it's helpful. I think it's great to take some lessons from this really high profile moment, but just around the value and the role of broadcast media, the art of the interview, owning the narrative, the choice around Oprah as an interviewer. I think all of that is really fascinating and applicable to what we do every day.
100%. Kate, thank you so much for taking the
Yeah.
time. Can't wait to do it again.
All right. Thanks, Anne.
All right, bye.